They're coming to get you, Barbara. They're coming for you, Barbara.
So today, we've got a doozy of a topic. This topic for me, this is my favorite movie series of all time. It includes my favorite movie of all time, one of my favorite directors, and my favorite actor. And
that's a lot of favorites.
There's a lot of favorites in this one. So we're going to just kind of start out with here. We're talking about the Terminator series. You have any thoughts on the Terminator series?
It's obviously not as important in my life as it is to yours. I think that's going to be apparent after this discussion for all of you. But I do love the franchise. I like all the films. I was a little cautious about the most recent one. I rewatched it in research for this and was a little warmer towards it. So we'll get to that later. I like the franchise. It's enjoyable. There's a lot of great things about it. There's a few things that I think people overrate a little bit. I think there's some amazing things that people underrate about the series, and I think it stands the test of time pretty well for the most part as a complete franchise, not just one movie here, one movie there. They all stand out pretty well.
All right, so we'll kind of go into how the Terminator thing kind of came about. James Cameron was a director. He'd only directed the movie Piranha 2 before this, but he'd gotten really, really sick. And he had a dream one night of this machine rising from these flames. And it kind of inspired the idea that he had for Terminator. He had to put it on hold a little bit because of contractual obligations that Arnold had during the filming of Conan the Barbarian, or Conan the Destroyer. But he finally got to make the movie, and it was released in 1984. It is James Cameron. His kind of breakout directorial debut, or not directorial debut, but his breakout kind of direction, and it's also Arnold's breakout role. He had done Conan before that, but this was the role that really solidified him.
Yeah, I mean, Conan, I think, really put him on the scene. I mean, we're going to ignore Hercules in New York. We're gonna talk. Well, obviously we didn't ignore it because I just mentioned it. But we're going to ignore that film for the most part. We're going to mention how Conan really started him off, really put him on the scene, made him a little more common of a name. So people, it wasn't like he was a complete unknown. But this movie is what made him the star. He would go on to do a lot of things afterwards, and I think this movie was really what jump-started it all.
Yeah, and this one right here is actually my favorite movie of all time. I love the whole science fiction. I mean, it's got... I'm a sucker for science fiction, especially time travel. I love action movies. I love horror movies. And this movie had all of that. It's my favorite movie of all time. I've watched this movie hundreds of times. I think it's a great mix of all those concepts. The techno score.
Wait, before you go any farther, I just want to hundreds of times. That is, I believe, a true statement. I'm not even going to argue with that. I just want to draw attention to the fact that is correct. That you said that wasn't an overstatement.
No, and I will probably watch this movie again tonight. Now that I'm talking about it, but I really just love the movie. Like all those concepts, those ideas. I'm a sucker for all of them. And then you throw Arnold into the mix, into his breakout role. It's the first time that the iconic line, "I'll be back," was ever mentioned, and it has subsequently been repeated over and over and over again. Now, there was a little bit of controversy from this. Harlan Ellison, who is a science fiction writer, it actually was similar to a lot of his stories, and if you watch on the credits, at the end of the movie, they have to put a special acknowledgement to Harlan Ellison for his ideas that he had.
I didn't know that was in there. I knew the story about how it wasn't completely James Cameron's idea. They had to do, but I didn't actually know it was credited in the film. Was that on the re-release, or was that always in there?
No, the original release didn't have it, but once they had seen it and Harlan Ellison had seen it, they kind of had a dispute, and it was settled basically by putting an acknowledgement to the works of Harlan Ellison at the end of the movie.
And I imagine he probably gets some kind of fee for
He might get
purchasing.
some kind of fee for it.
Yeah.
It was actually a throwback to, and if you don't know who Harlan Ellison is, he's a famous science fiction writer who wrote a lot of classic Outer Limits episodes, and that's kind of the dispute that these Outer Limits episodes were an inspiration for the Terminator. And he was also, probably his most famous writing that I can think of would be the episode City on the Edge of Forever from Star Trek the original series.
Oh wow, I'm learning all kinds of things tonight. I did not know that either. That's one of the most famous episodes of the original series, with good reason. It's quite a wonderful episode, and I think that's pretty amazing that most people probably wouldn't know that about the film. And obviously, I've watched the film growing up and watched it maybe 70 times, not nearly as many as you, obviously, but I've never known that about it either.
Yeah, and but the movie was, I mean, obviously it's my favorite movie of all time. There's a lot to say about it. I think Arnold was great as the Terminator. He actually went in and tried out for the role of Kyle Reese, but when he came in, he felt a lot more connection to the Terminator character and thought that was the good character of the movie. Luckily, he did, because that's his most iconic role. Lance Henriksen, on the other hand, who was actually in that movie as well, he came in testing out for the Terminator role, and there's kind of a famous story about him coming in. He had some tinfoil on his face, and he just started knocking things off their desk and everything like that. Really got into the part, but eventually he didn't even get the Terminator part. He got a kind of a secondary role as one of the police officers at the Los Angeles Police Department.
Yeah, can you imagine him as the Terminator? That would not. I don't think the movie would have it. I love Lance Henriksen. I mean, Pumpkinhead is amazing. His work in the Alien films, in the Aliens film.
He's also got that iconic voice that you love.
Oh, it's great. But I couldn't imagine him as I don't think the film would be that landmark film that it was. Had he been cast as the Terminator. I just don't think so.
Well, and the original idea for the Terminator was to have somebody who was an every person that you would never expect them. They were the infiltrators. You would never expect them to be a Terminator.
I don't think that would. Yeah, and it's a great concept, but how it would have played out, it would have made a totally different film. Through the way the film is presented, he's this unstoppable killing machine, and instead of him being this infiltrator, this regular guy, this unstoppable killing machine that yes, he could blend in. And there's a scene in the film where they show, I think it's a dream or a flashback. I believe it's a flashback, where you see what he was seeing, what Kyle was seeing, and you see the Terminator infiltrate, and that's how they could get in. It doesn't matter that he's a little bigger, because there are human beings that look like that, and a lot of people could. I mean, obviously in the famine and stuff, it'd be less likely, but you still would have somebody that could possibly have been born large and just have that build. And I think that to have that he was so frightening when the way he was unstoppable, and I think it really stood out with his character. And Arnold portrayed. I don't think anyone else could have portrayed it as accurately as you'll see in the other films. The way the Terminators are presented, Arnold really embodies that spirit of unstoppable, of a machine that just will not stop ever until you are dead.
That's a great quote, and I have actually memorized most of the quotes from that movie. But just kind of, going at it here, I think Michael Biehn gives a great performance. Linda Hamilton's okay. She's not that good, not that bad. She's actually better in the second one. Arnold, that's his iconic role. You can't really say too much about that. And then Bill Paxton. You can't forget about international superstar Bill Paxton and his little bit role that he had.
Yeah, and what's funny about that opening scene too is that one of the other Street Punks guys is also famous. The only thing I remember him offhand from is the Buffalo Bob character from Joe Dirt. But
and he was a big X-Files character.
Was he? Yeah, he's been in a lot of things. You've seen it. He's one of those actors, you know who he is. You just can't really, you don't know his name very well.
He's also been on a few Star Trek episodes as Klingons and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I mean, there's so many things you can't, with the cast, you have to mention about the film.
Yeah. So kind of moving on here, Terminator is my favorite movie of all time, but it was kind of a cheap budget movie, and James Cameron went on to make Aliens and The Abyss after this, and he was a pretty well-known name in Hollywood. So in 1991, when he decided that he was going to revisit the whole Terminator story, he decided that Terminator 2, and it was actually the first movie that ever had a $100 million budget.
Oh, really? That crossed the line. I mean, I'm sure if you adjust for inflation, for other films before that, now you would see it. But that's a fun fact.
Yeah, and so it's actually by most fans is considered the best in the series. It was a huge hit when it came out, despite being a rated R movie. Different times, you can't really have a rated R movie become that big of a hit these days.
Well, yes and no. I mean, you can still have it make multiple hundreds of $1 million. It's very uncommon. It does happen, but it's quite a challenge. It's quite an undertaking to make that happen because you limit your audience, the amount of people who can actually see your film. But I mean, think about when 300 opened. It opened to 70 million on its opening weekend, and that was in 2007. So I mean, films can definitely still. R-rated films can definitely still reach an audience. It's just much more challenging.
So, Terminator 2, it was a monumental effort at the time, but I think it's still, when you watch it today, it still stands up. The effects that were done, special effects done by Stan Winston, still hold. I mean, he did the special effects in the first one, but it was a whole lot cheaper budget. In this one, those effects still stand up to this day. I mean, the CGI isn't. Sometimes I watch movies today, the CGI is terrible. It wasn't in this movie, and that was over 20 years ago.
There are a few things. I think the scene where he's coming out of the train wreck, the semi wreck. Those things don't. There's a few that don't hold up as well, but yes, for the most part, it has aged well. Though I would honestly say it's one of my least favorite in the series. It is definitely aged. It is one of the most popular. There's a reason it's one of the most popular. It has a lot of really timeless scenes. It was quotable. It stood out with audiences. The "Hasta La Vista Baby" was so popular when it came out. It's
not as iconic as "I'll Be Back," but still pretty popular.
Exactly. And there's some great lines in the film. No fate but what we make for ourselves, and things like that. That really still. They're simple quotes or things like that, but they hold still. You still recognize them and reference the movie when you hear them.
And they kind of changed it a little bit. Like if I can do a kind of a correlation here, because James Cameron did do Aliens. The first Aliens was very atmospheric, very horror kind of movie, or Alien was, and then Aliens was very much just a straight action movie. And that's kind of the difference between the first Terminator and Terminator 2. It's more action, less science fiction and horror.
Yeah, while I wouldn't call the original Terminator a horror film, I would definitely refer to it as an action film. If I had to pick one genre to pigeonhole it into, I would pick action. But yes, there is tonal differences, extreme tonal differences between the first film and the second film.
And I still remember watching the chase scene in the semi and the motorbike and everything, and the Harley with my dad's first ever surround sound system. He would play that part for everybody. That scene is just it's probably hands down the best scene in the whole movie, and I just have some great memories with that one. And that kind of gives you the tone of the movie, the whole action thing.
And I would say it's kind of one thing that is kind of sad about the fact that they changed the action for the complete tonal shift is you really lose it in the rest of the films in the franchise. You do see them try and bring it back in a few scenes in each film, but neither film. I think Salvation does a much better job than any of the films of trying to add that element back into the film. Whereas the two in the middle just kind of drop it completely.
Yeah, the two in the middle kind of focus on the action. Great performances in this movie. Linda Hamilton, this is her best role. I mean, she didn't do anything in the third one, but of the Terminator series, this was the best performance she gave in the second one. She beefed up and everything.
Yeah, and you can't really count her audio performance in the fourth one at all. So this one definitely stood out. It was almost like watching two different Sarah Connors. It wasn't the same character.
Which is perfect for the story. Also, interesting fact, she wanted it to feel so real that she actually learned how to pick locks. So when they strapped her down, she had them really strap her down, and that she would pick the locks out with herself with the two paper clips. And then she also picked the lock herself on the door. So she did all of that stuff by herself because she wanted it to feel as real as possible.
No wonder she gets along with James Cameron, who runs a pretty harsh set from what I've heard and likes to torture his actors. So she fits in real well. But, I mean, it's natural progression of her character after the traumatic events that happened to her in the first film and the oncoming storm. She knows, the storm that's coming, she knows about. She has to change. She can't be that same innocent girl that she was in the first film.
She has to be a different mother to raise John Connor to be the leader of the resistance.
She's preparing for the future.
So she puts in a great performance. Arnold, I actually think he surpasses his original performance in the first Terminator. He was a lot scarier in the first one, but he didn't have a whole lot of range. It's kind of just be the Terminator, walk like a machine, and kill people.
It worked for that movie, but he couldn't. Again, we shifted tones. We can't have that same movie. He can't be he's the good guy in this one, whereas in the last one, he was meant to be that villain that had very few words and was meant to be terrifying. And this one, he's meant to be your buddy. You're meant to fall in love with him.
And Robert Patrick, as the antagonist in this one, he actually puts on a great performance as the T-1000, even though, and I'll tell you, I've researched the heck out of Terminator timelines, because there's intersecting timelines and everything like that. I've kind of figured out everything, but they do break a cardinal rule that was established in the first movie by bringing the T-1000 into it, that nothing living or nothing dead could go. The only reason the original Terminator could go was because it's a living tissue over metal endoskeleton. T-1000 was all metal. He shouldn't have been able to go back. So they kind of broke that rule established in the first movie.
Well, yes and no. I agree they did break the rule, and I'm kind of arguing, it's grabbing at straws here. But, I mean, technically when he shifts into human form, wouldn't he register? Couldn't he possibly fool the sensors in registering as human?
No, I don't think so at all.
Well, then there you go. Like I said, I was grasping at straws there.
But I thought it was a great performance and a great score. And this is one of the scores that I don't think was done by Danny Elfman or John Williams that is very, very memorable. And if you get the chance, there's a band out there called Austrian Death Machine. Every single song is Arnold lyrics or Arnold quotes. And there's a great, on their second album, which I think is called Double Brutal, there's actually a metal version of the T2 theme that is pretty good, so you should check that out.
Yeah, I can't agree that the whole score is really amazing. The main theme is extremely iconic. You hear those notes and they just stand out. I mean, I know people who knock that way. Present Company might be included in that.
I knock that way. Whenever I knock on somebody's door, I do that. So we go from T2, which was hugely popular. There was actually a T2 I forget what it's called, but it was a 3D film that James Cameron did with Eddie Furlong and Arnold Schwarzenegger that was at Universal Studios, I believe.
Yeah, it was in the Florida, Orlando.
But next movie we get is going to be in 2003. It was directed by Jonathan Mostow. He also did U-571, which I'm actually a big fan of. I like submarine movies, and that was pretty good. But he did, in 2003, they did Terminator: Rise of the Machines. A lot of fans hate this movie, and I don't think it deserves the hate it gets.
I really enjoy this film more than the second one. I do understand some of their concerns. I do have some problems myself, some issues. But overall, I think you have a better John Connor. You have...
Well, Eddie Furlong was very, very bothersome. I forgot to mention that in the last one. He's the worst part of Terminator 2. It would be a lot better if Eddie Furlong wasn't in it. And Nick Stahl does a whole lot better job of it in Terminator 3.
Yeah, I would probably say he is my favorite of the John Connors that I've seen. He really nails down the character, the complexity of what it would be to be this character who has been told about your future. Imagine knowing what your future is and trying to live up to, especially a future that's so great and so traumatic, and yet trying to knowing you have to live up to this at some point. And he really, I think, while not amazing, Oscar-worthy or anything on those levels, it is a good performance. He does a good job, nails the character. There's some other great characters in this. Claire Danes does a good job as Catherine Brewster. I really like her.
Catherine Brewster.
I think Arnold does another great job as the Terminator. Though
He's got that character down by this point, though.
this is true, but there are a few. He does again. He has a few script problems. Some of the things we all can discuss: the sunglasses scene and how much we hate that. The talk to the hand scene and how much we hate that scene.
I love it. I thought it was great. It was more fun of a movie. That's what separates kind of T2 from T3 for me.
It made me feel like the swinging monkey scene in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. That's how I felt about that scene. It was so, and that, I mean, as long as the whole movie wasn't that, so I was okay with it. But there was a few problems, and I see why fans had issues with that. But those things to me don't ruin the movie. The overall film, I think, is great. I think it has the best ending of any of the films, for sure, of any of the Terminator films.
Oh, for sure. I mean, hands down, the best ending comes at the end of Rise of the Machines, where you actually get to see Judgment Day happen. I think it's the most fun of the movies. The first Terminator was obviously my favorite movie. T2 was an amazing action movie. The effects still, like I said, stand up today and everything like that. It was great. But the most fun of the movies was the Terminator 3, and everybody hated it. I didn't mind the sunglasses scene. I didn't mind the talk to the hand scene. I thought it was really good. Kristanna Loken, she was a really good villain in this one as the TX. It actually, I mean, if you watch anything else of hers, it's pretty bad. But she did a really good job as a TX.
Hey, Blood Rain is great. Come on, you ball. No. It's fantastic. It's wonderful.
Yeah, Blood Rain's pretty terrible. It didn't take itself too seriously, and that's kind of what I liked about it. That's what kind of made it the most fun of it. Nick Stahl was obviously better than Furlong. He played a better John Connor. Kate Brewster, Claire Danes was a great addition to the series. And the TX, the T1000 was really good. I didn't really like the idea of the TX. I mean, I liked the idea that it was a Terminator, but I didn't like the concept of the metal endoskeleton covered by the liquid metal. I don't think that really worked. It was the next evolution, but it just didn't work for me.
It kind of seemed like a step down, honestly. The only way it was a step up was that it could control the machines. The T1000 was superior in every other way for the most part, but it didn't have that aspect to it, which I thought was the best part of the story with the character, with the TX. I thought her performance was just okay. I didn't think it was anything amazing. I know you're a fan of the scene when they get into the Air Force Base. There's some great stuff in there. But for the most part, I thought she was rather a weak villain. Didn't really add anything new or original to the series. There was some problems with her character. There's some great things about her character. She made me laugh a few times, especially in the beginning of the movie, the earlier
where
parts.
She increases her breast size.
Yes, but overall, it was kind of lackluster. And I don't think that takes necessarily away from the film. I think the rest of the good qualities of the film make up for some of the negative things I have to say about the film. The fun spirit you mentioned is definitely there. It's unlike any of the films at all. It felt like an adventure film, like an action adventure film, not just an action film. Like it's like what leads us to the next thing, what leads us, and it didn't have as dark a tone as any of the other ones had at all. It was completely, for how dark the material was, it was surprisingly lighthearted.
Yeah, and that kind of made it, a little bit more accessible in the fun nature of it. But then we get we go back to the kind of dark form in 2008, and we get Terminator Salvation. And this is kind of the most hated by fans, I think. I don't know if it's Terminator 3 or Salvation, but I think it's mostly Salvation. It's the only one without Arnold in the movie at all. I mean, there's a CGI version, but that's not Arnold.
Yeah, it was based off, I think they took a mold of his that he made in 1984, a mold of his face, and used that for the basis of the CGI. But again, it was CGI. It was not Arnold. It wasn't the same thing. I thought even throwing that in there was kind of insulting, to be quite honest. It's like, if you're not going to give me Arnold, why give me this pale comparison? That's not what I'm looking for. I was enjoying the idea of watching a story that didn't have to involve Arnold. I thought the Terminator franchise was large enough that it could expand beyond just having Arnold. Obviously, it's great having him in there. And to throw it into, kind of felt like a cheesy, we're trying to have a tribute. There was other things they did in the film that I thought really did a good job, like throwing in "You Could Be Mine" by Guns N' Roses. I thought that was a nice little tribute to it.
Which was featured in Terminator 2.
In Terminator
music
2.
video. If you ever check out the music video on YouTube for You Could Be Mine, it's actually it was based on the movie, and you can watch Arnold go through and attack Axl Rose if you'd like.
Yeah, and so I think it was nice having some things like that, but I thought having Arnold in it was just too much. I really felt it was
CGI'd Arnold.
CGI'd Arnold, excuse me. I thought it was really stretching and it was pointless. I was glad that they quickly nailed him with like a grenade
it was
or
like
something.
Steam or something.
It was like a
grenade.
grenade. It was a grenade that blows off his flesh, and I was really happy that was. I wish it could have happened sooner, and to be quite honest.
Yeah, and Salvation. It wasn't the movie I don't think fans wanted. They wanted to see the future war, the one that was hinted at in all the first three movies, and they really didn't get that. They got another story, which the focus wasn't on John meeting Kyle so much. It was on John, Kyle, and this other guy, Sam, played by Sam Worthington. I think his name was Marcus Wright.
Yeah, Marcus was his name.
And he was actually added into the script because of a suggestion from Cameron, who was filming Avatar at the time, and he was Jake Sully, the main character from Avatar, and he's like, you really got to put this guy in your movie. So he ended up being in the movie, and I think it really detracted from the story.
I originally, to make it clear, when I first watched Salvation, I really did not like the film. I thought it had a lot of problems. I thought it had so much potential, and there was moderate execution. There was some great action sequences, but the plot is what makes your film, and if you don't have that, nothing else can make up for it. And when I watched it again recently, yesterday in fact, I realized that I was a little too harsh on it my first time, though I still see a lot of the problems with the film. It is a fun ride, a darker ride. It was nice that they tried to bring back that aspect to it. They tried to make this world not too inaccessible. We didn't want it to seem too bleak, but you had to add the aspect of how grave the situation was, how 95% of the Earth's population, at least, has been wiped out, and the resistance is now struggling to gain control, and how the struggle of everyday life. And I think Marcus really emphasized that they were trying to, again, he was a good character, I think, because he was trying to show how humanity can't lose its roots and you can't stop being human. He was a machine, but he was still human. He didn't want to lose that aspect of his character, and in this war you're fighting with machines. You can't lose what makes you human while trying to take down the machines and regain your humanity. You can't lose it to regain it.
Yeah, and being the big Terminator fan that I am, I've actually come up in my head with a better storyline. This was originally supposed to be the first movie of a new trilogy, and I thought of a better way of doing it. And the first part, which would have been Salvation, cuts out Marcus Wright or Sam Worthington's character altogether and just focuses on John Connor trying to find Kyle Reese before the Terminator kill him.
Fun fact before I let you continue, I was reading about the original ending they had planned for the movie involving Marcus was that Connor was supposed to die, and they would graft his face onto Marcus, and he would continue on as John Connor. But it was leaked in pre-production, and apparently they changed the way they ended the film. Because of that, they didn't want to stick with that. How would you have felt about that?
That would have been a terrible ending.
Yes, it would have made the movie worse.
Oh, terrible! It would have been worse than that. There's something I just forgot. Terminator 3. If you get a chance to check out the DVD, check out the Sergeant Candy scene. It's a special feature. It's only about 5 minutes long. Trust me, I'm not going to say anything about it. Just check it out. But then also with the Terminator Salvation, I mean, it was probably my least favorite, but there are some stuff I like about it. And what I kind of liked is it was directed by McG, who of like Charlie's Angels, Full Throttle or whatever fame. But there was some other stuff. There was a prequel book that I really enjoyed called From the Ashes. If you're going to watch the series, you should probably pick up that book and read it before you watch Terminator Salvation. Also, there's a Mishima series, which is actually a stop-motion stop-motion animated movie featuring Blair Williams, or the character Blair Williams, played by Moon Bloodgood. So if you get a chance, check those out. If you're going to watch the series or anything like that, it's both of those two. I just kind of want to add in to the Terminator Salvation discussion.
As always, I like to ask what was your favorite moment of things. That's a big thing. I like to know what stands out to you, and I'm going to ask you right now. So we've discussed all 4 films. Is there any one specific moment from any one of those films that you think stands out, either from your life personally or as from a filmmaking aspect, from a writing, whatever, acting, that is the number one Terminator moment for you?
Terminator. It's got to be something from the first one. For me, obviously, the first one, and the scene that I love the most is actually going to be the exposition scene where Kyle Reese and Linda Hamilton, Sarah Connor, are going through this parking garage trying to find a vehicle, and Kyle's kind of explaining to her about the future and everything like that. And that whole scene, I love quoting that scene, and everything about it is just, I love hearing the story about the future. So that would probably be my favorite scene.
Didn't I quote? Wasn't that where I give a quote from it earlier?
Yes. And I know it's not your favorite series, but do you have a favorite scene from it?
Oh yes, definitely. Oddly enough, this one is more so a favorite scene because of my personal affiliation with it. It is also from the first film, and it's from my childhood. For when I was a kid, my father wanted to watch all the movies that he wanted to watch with us, so he would let us watch them with him. So all the action and the swearing was no problems, but there's a sex scene in the first Terminator film.
The conception of John Connor.
It's very important to the series. It's a big deal. It will have ramifications throughout the entire rest of the series. And we were not supposed to be allowed to watch this. So instead of fast forwarding through it or anything like this, because it was VHSs at the time, a little more complicated, and you didn't want to mess up your tape, we had to cover our eyes. And I remember I always would cover my eyes with some pretty open fingers.
Yeah, you got to peek. You got to peek through that.
You had to have the hands through it. It was just the way it worked. You kind of cheated when you were a kid and had to look. It was like, oh yeah, good. I'll cover my eyes, Dad. Psych.
And it's not even that great of a sex scene, but it was just the.
It's the memory from my childhood. From your childhood. We grew up watching that film. Obviously, why it's so important in your life, why it's so important in both of our lives, and that scene to me stands out. I think about it regularly. I tell that story regularly about how it was growing up watching those movies and not watching Disney films, not watching all those kids movies. We grew up watching the films I would love as adult. We would grow up to love as adults, and I think not a lot of.
That's why I'm such a huge fan of the Terminator today.
Yeah,
there was probably a year there where I watched that movie almost every single day when we were kids.
Yeah, not a lot of children can say they've had an experience like that growing up, where they got to watch the movies that were great movies and really grow up loving them and trying to understand them. I grew up with a lot of films that a lot of people didn't watch till they were younger, like The Exorcist, Aliens, things like that. And it really helped shape my life. And I'm glad I had people who could explain that to me, and I'm glad they stuck with me. And I can't wait. We didn't mention it yet, but I can't wait for the new film that they're going to be putting out.
Yes, Terminator Genesis. There isn't a whole lot of information out about it. It will be coming out next year on July 1st. Arnold will be back as the Terminator. He's an aged Terminator. There is a good idea that I've heard. The reason why he's he's a little bit older and stuff like that. I think they do a pretty good job of it. Coming into trying to deal with his age. The guy's in his 60s now. But expect that out on July 1st. And I love the first 4 films. I'm pretty sure this one's going to be good. Some of the things I've heard aren't so good, but you said you're excited for this?
Yes. The only thing I really know about it though is that it's they spelled Genesis with like SYS or something to recognize like the system for the. And I don't know how I feel about that. It's a little cheesy, a little hokey. Yeah. But then again, I really like cheese a lot, to be quite honest. So it might not be that bad. I hope it. My expectations and hopes for it is that it'll have I'm looking for a fun spirit. I don't want them. They tried the dark last time. It's fine. Arnold's a little older. I want a fun romp action adventure film like the third film. That's what I hope.
I'm actually gonna. I just discovered this tonight, but James Cameron, the rights go back to him in 2018, and he's planning on releasing Terminator 3, his Terminator 3, in 2018.
I don't know. He'll still be, knee deep in Avatar, so I'd have to research into that.
He's making all the next 3 Avatars right now, so he's going to do that one. They're supposed to be released. Avatar 4 and Terminator 3 are supposed to be released the same year, 2018.
I'll reserve judgment till I look into that.
Alrighty, so that is my favorite movie series, including my favorite movie of all time. Right now, we're going to step along and go to Tea Time with Mr. Joshua.
Tea time! Tea time!
Hi, welcome back to another Tea Time with Mr. Joshua. We're finishing up our Doctor Who this week, and I once again have my Piccadilly blend with me and my Doctor Who mug. And we're going to finish off with all the way up to the 11th Doctor, since we don't really know up to the 12th Doctor. So we'll start off right away with Paul McGann, the 8th Doctor, who we don't really get to know too well in his one appearance in the 96 movie, with the great international superstar Eric Roberts as the Master. Can't help but love him and the U.S. attempt at bringing Doctor Who here. You can't really say too much. You don't really get to know him. He doesn't even come in until 30 minutes into the episode. You do get the first kiss, the first romantic thing you really get to see from the Doctor ever, which you could say you'll see a lot of later in the new era. Here in our, as you mentioned earlier, our regeneration of the Doctor, with them trying to bring the Doctor Who back after a few years. This was a failed attempt, the failed attempt in '96. But he did get popular in radio adventures, the audio adventures from Big Finish, which I like quite a bit. Some good companions. They even have companions that they've mentioned in the Night of the Doctor. If you saw the little mini short leading up to the Day of the Doctor, where you actually get to see Paul McGann come back, his only other appearance in Doctor Who.
And after after that came out and I saw that, I did read some stuff where a lot of fans were wanting a Paul McGann series, kind of like a spin-off series on Doctor Who, showing Paul McGann's adventures as the 8th Doctor, because you never get to see those. You just get the one movie, and he was involved in the whole big war between the Time War and everything like that. So I thought that was a really interesting idea. I've never seen the movie, so I don't really have anything else to say about Paul McGann.
Yeah, so there really isn't that much more to say, but I'll just mention I love Molly O'Sullivan because I'm a Ruth Bradley fan. If you watched Grabbers, my suggestion from last week, she is one of the stars of that film, and she made a great audio adventure companion. So that's a good one, Dark Eyes, if you like audio adventures. Moving on, though, we'll obviously get into New Who, what most people are familiar with when we discuss Doctor Who, and not a lot of fans. At least a lot of newer fans who are getting into the show have really looked into the older series. Hopefully, if you're listening to this, you have, or at least care a little bit. But New Who, I like a lot of it. I dislike a lot of it too, just like the original run of the show. But I think we can discuss how the 9th Doctor, Chris Eccleston, come in. And
is it Eccleston or Eccleston?
Eccleston. I'm not actually quite sure. We'll just call him Chris. We'll call him Chris. Since he doesn't really like to be part of Doctor Who, we'll just call him Chris. We won't give him that much. The 9th Doctor. We'll get into that a little bit later. But the 9th Doctor, Russell T Davies brought the show back to much fanfare. Rose was very popular with fans as a companion because she was very much a regular girl who, a lot of people could identify with, especially, she was just a girl working in a shop in London, which, a lot of people are doing, just working menial jobs, and she gets taken on this whirlwind adventure, and there's a lot of great episodes you get to see with the 9th Doctor. I think you get to see a lot more heart. You do get to see the differences from the new show to the classic. They did try and keep the cheese, the special effects and stuff, with adding a modern take on it. They switched to the 45-minute episodes, which they had only ever done with the 6th Doctor unsuccessfully. And this new format worked. The show came back to much fare. I guess, keeping it away made people want it more. There was some bad episodes in a season. I mean, you have the invasion with the aliens, the farting aliens. I mean, I can't think of anyone who I know likes that episode. I did hear someone had a Slovene something on something. I was like, who would have a Slovene anything? They're horrible. But even the long game with Simon Pegg, even though you got great talent, the episode it didn't pan out to be that wonderful. But it's kind of sad you didn't get to see Eccleston, Chris, to stick around and see what he could have done with the Doctor. A lot of people liked his Doctor, and we never really got to really see him fleshed out too much.
Well, and my foray into the whole Doctor Who thing obviously started with the 9th Doctor, and it's the only Doctor that I've actually watched all the episodes from. So it's really the only one that I can speak to. I didn't mind him too much. I actually kind of liked him. Favorite episode, obviously there's two good episodes. I don't remember what the name of the one was, but the one I really did like was Dalek, with just the single Dalek that he thought they were all gone, and I really, really enjoyed that episode. The rest of the show, I mean, it was okay. It just didn't do a whole lot for me, and I watched a few episodes of The Next Doctor, but I kind of gave up after that.
Before we go on to The Next Doctor, which we're about to start, I'm going to ask you, was the other episode one that had to do with kids in gas masks, or was it one where Rose was in her own timeline?
Rose was in her own timeline. I'm a sucker for that kind of story and stuff. I didn't like the stupid aliens in there. I thought they could have done without those. I think the story would have been a lot better with it.
The episode you're discussing is Father's Day. I'm quite a fan of that episode. It's one of the first ones that really tries to tug for your hearts, your emotions a lot, which Russell T Davies and Stephen Moffat in their eras in New Who would both quite do. But you'd see it especially a lot in Tennant. We'd see it extended even beyond that, where they would start going further.
And that's the 10th Doctor, the one following Chris.
That's correct, Chris. But David Tennant was a great doctor. A lot of people like him. I own his coat, a replica of his coat. It's quite a nice coat. I get a lot of compliments on it. I look good in it. I can't help but say that.
Well, real quick, would you say that Tennant or Chris was the start of the whole dreamy Doctor?
Oh, Tennant. I can speak from my personal, how many women I know that have a love affair with David Tennant. The accent, the everything about him just makes, they love it. I don't know why. I like David Tennant. He's a great actor. I see him in a lot of things. Broadchurch is receiving a lot of rave reviews. They're putting the new American Grace Point, I think it's called, remake out. But he's really a great actor. He's become an icon. You know, people identify him with Doctor Who quite a bit. I mean, he is even married to the daughter of the Fifth Doctor, Peter Davidson. Georgia Moffat, who played his daughter, oddly enough, in an episode, the Doctor's daughter.
And that is David Tennant's favorite Doctor. Going back to last week, Peter Davison is David Tennant's favorite Doctor. It's the one that really kind of got him into Doctor Who.
In David Tennant's era, though, you'd see some great things. The 10th Doctor, I mean, great companion, Donna, who is definitely the best companion of the new series, really solidified just how good you could be with just a simple companion who wanted to have a good time. There was no romance. There was nothing else involved with it. A person traveling around with the Doctor, helping him guide his moral conscience. And Donna really, I think most fans will agree, she stands out far and away the best companion of all of New Who since it came back.
What about Mickey or Ricky?
Ricky. Mickey. I like Noel Clarke. He's a great actor. I think he really developed as a character well. I think when they ended him, he was great. But I'm sorry, Donna, better than Rose. All of you guys who think Rose is great, you're wrong. Donna's the best. Midnight. If you watch Midnight, she's not even in that episode. You know, great. Her episode I think was called Left Turn. The Doctor and her each got their own little individual episodes. Both great episodes. Midnight, my favorite New Who episode probably of all. It's a great story about how easily people can be frightened. It's kind of like the monsters on Maple Street from the Twilight Zone, where people can easily turn against each other. And then her episode is an alternate reality, the world without the Doctor. What would have happened to Earth? All those things we saw happening were great. And he really saved it, and his era really was quite large, and it really solidified New Who, and the show moving forward became large, and this ended the Russell T Davies era.
It ended in the right before the last series of David Tennant, right?
No, it ended on his the last episodes were the end of his. As soon as he ended, Stephen Moffat, who wrote a lot of the Great Day episodes during the Russell T Davies era, took over with Matt Smith as our 11th Doctor.
Mr. Chin.
The Chin, as a lot of people like to call him, who I'm not a huge fan of. I think this has little to do with his acting. He's a great actor. He does a fine job portraying the character, very similar to the second Doctor. But I think his stories, Moffat, just his era is different. It's very much more about the mystic and these grand schemes instead of really concentrating on good episodes. I think in his era, you see a lot of contrast. You see really good episodes and a really bad episode. You see every episode have really great moments and have really stupid moments for the most part. There's very few episodes that are solid all the way through, and this, I think, is what has been the hardest for me to adapt, because I do like the actors. I mean, Amy Pond got me in the show. Karen Gillan was the reason I started watching Doctor Who, and I can't stand her character at all. She's one of my least favorite companions, and it's unfortunate because the show has so much potential, and every week on every episode I see it there, and every week though I'm slightly frustrated with it as the direction he took the show in, especially when his era started with the 11th Doctor.
Yeah, and I've watched quite a few Matt Smith episodes. I just, for the life of me, cannot get into him. I don't know if it's the bad writing like you suggest or just the characters or whatever, but there isn't one episode that I've watched. Now, I haven't gotten far enough. I stopped in the beginning of Tennant's era, but I haven't watched enough of Matt Smith from the beginning. But I've watched episodes here and there and everything like that. I did watch, was it the Day of the Doctor, the Name of the Doctor,
the trilogy, as you want to call it. It was the day, the night, and the time, I think, or the name, the day, and the time. The season finale, the 50th anniversary, and the Christmas special.
And that's when my favorite Doctor comes in, the War Doctor.
Oh, I don't really. I know we've had the Valeyard and stuff, but the War Doctor is a little much for me. I love John Hurt, but I don't really. I'm still on the fence. I don't really want to talk about it.
I don't like the story that they did with the whole Time War, basically rewriting the Time War. That really turned me off to the whole idea and made me dislike Moffat. All the stuff you've been saying about Moffat, it really made me dislike him because he just kind of rewrote the entire Time War, and I thought that was the most interesting part. Now, granted, I really do like the John Hurt character, and I thought the War Doctor was a pretty awesome Doctor.
The potential was there.
Yeah, but I think they kind of not really jumped the shark, but they really did a disservice to their whole mythology by changing that story around.
I feel that Moffat was not really comfortable with what Russell T Davies did with the show, and he felt he wanted to change it and adjust it. And I feel that the way the 11th Doctor ends, I can say there's some episodes I like The Girl Who Waited, and there's some characters I like Roy, but I can say at the same time there's episodes I hated, absolutely despised, like The Wedding of River Song, and I hate River Song. I absolutely despise her. So I'm really mixed on his era so far. Going on to finish finish it up here with the 12th Doctor, who's just come in, Peter Capaldi. We're just watching his episodes as they're coming out. I'm going to reserve judgment till the end of his first season, at least, before I say anything official about it. It's kind of a continuation, though. That's the most I'm going to say on it. I'm still patiently waiting, cautiously hoping that
optimistic
that I'm going to get what I know the show's potential has. We'll see.
When I heard that Peter Capaldi was going to be the 12th Doctor, I said right from there, I will watch him from the beginning, because the whole teeny bopper kind of girly thing about Doctor Who, he's dreamy, this stuff that I think the fandom, the people who are really going to stick with it are going to stick with it through Capaldi. The writing's the same as it was for Smith, not really that good, in my opinion anyway. But I told you I'd watch Capaldi. I've been watching it since he started, so let's hope he turns out
We'll hope
good.
he turns out okay, and he's growing, and we're finally seeing we're starting to see what he's like. And at the end, we'll hopefully at some point I'll discuss him on another tea time and give my thoughts on the his entire season, and we'll see how it stands compared to the rest of New Who. And that's Doctor Who. So my movie of the week this week is going to be Sky High. It's The Incredibles meets Harry Potter. If you haven't seen it, check it out.
What are you doing in my swamp?
Welcome to another installment of Schreck Swamp. I'm going to be discussing something today that's actually fairly new. It's only been out for a few years. It's the Rush album called Clockwork Angels. I know you've listened to this album, Mr. Joshua. What do you think?
Yeah, actually, I was a little late coming into it, but I actually really got into it when I was at work and we were playing the concert at as an event at my theater. I remembered hearing these songs from when you had bought the album, and I loved it. And I went out and purchased it myself, even though you owned it. I could have just taken your copy. I wanted my own copy. I enjoyed it that much, so I definitely think it's some amazing work by an amazing band.
And it was, everybody knows the Rush name, kind of the Tom Sawyer thing, Limelight, The Spirit of Radio, kind of famous. And I think this album is actually wholly underrated. It was released in 2012, in June of that year, and I honestly think it's the best album since 2112, which is my favorite Rush album. It's kind of a multimedia concept album about steampunk.
So, real quick, if you say it's your favorite since your favorite album, would you say it's your second favorite?
Yes,
Rush
it
album?
is definitely on my second favorite. It's my second favorite album. There was only like 3 albums before 2112. This one's definitely better than those. And I did mention it's about steampunk, which I don't know if you know this because I didn't really know this before the album came out. But what steampunk is, I had to ask a few people and do some research on it when the album came out. But steampunk is actually a genre of science fiction that is based on the way 19th century people would have envisioned the future to be, featuring dirigibles, trains, steam power as the main source of energy. And I didn't kind of know this before this album came out.
2 things. One, I hate the word dirigibles. And
I love the word dirigibles. That's why I said it.
And 2, I actually did know what steampunk was because I'm really, sadly, fashion conscious. So I know a lot about different styles of clothes, and I think the steampunk looks are actually quite cool. And some people have even told me I would. That's kind of similar to the style I wear. So I really like that. And so I actually did know a little bit about it. I wasn't too detailed into it, but I did have an inkling of what it was.
Yeah, and I kind of felt bad at the time that I didn't know what it was about. But there's a lot of references to it and a lot of anime and stuff like that. And also you'll find it in the movie. What was that movie? It was Zack Snyder.
Sucker Punch, I believe the one you're talking about.
There's a great scene in there about steampunk, like how World War I would have been with steampunk. But I honestly, when it comes to the album, it is something that I honestly loved every single track on it. A few of the standout tracks include BU2B, which is actually text tense for Brought Up to Believe. We actually had a single version of that before the album came out, and I really enjoyed that song. Also, Carnies, I love the guitar riff on that one, and your personal favorite song on the album, Headlong Flight.
Yeah, I don't know how you can even name the other songs and compare it. I mean, I love all the tracks on the album as well. Well, not all, but there's one that I feel is kind of throwaway. But for the most part, the album's great. That song, though, to me, hands down, best song on the album.
And they did a lot of work on this one and really concentrated on a more full sound. The drums were orchestrated with a conductor. He actually sat in front of Neil Peart, or Peart, however you want to pronounce it, and conducted his drums. And there is an ongoing orchestra of 6 violins and 2 cellos. I guess it's a mini orchestra that actually was throughout the entire album, and he conducted those as well. I did mention earlier that it is a multimedia concept album, like with Pink Floyd. When they did the album The Wall, they came out with Pink Floyd's The Wall, the movie. Well, in this instance, they did a Clockwork Angels book in addition to the movie or the album that they released.
It's like a novelization of a movie, but it's a novelization of a CD, of an album.
Yes, and you'll find a lot of concepts that are in the book and different things about Rush and stuff like that are actually in the book. They're little facts here and there and stuff like that.
So when they conceived the album, was the book written, conceptualized at the same time, or was the book conceptualized after the album was written and based off of the songs and the idea with input from the band?
They actually did them both simultaneously, to my understanding. The book was written by Kevin J. Anderson, who's actually most famous for his continuing the Dune series after Frank Herbert died. He's been doing that with Frank Herbert's son, so that's kind of his most famous thing. He's also done a lot of stuff with Superman and those kind of things, but him and Neil are really good friends, so they kind of worked out the whole storyline and everything like that together before they wrote the music and the book at the same time.
You know, I'm kind of surprised that it actually took them this long to come to this point. If you look back at their history, especially since Neil came into the band, when he became the primary lyricist, they have always had an interest in science fiction and large, grand themes, concepts like that. Now, it's actually kind of surprising to me that it took them this long to get a book that coincided with the album. I mean, it's not that surprising. It's a grand undertaking to do something like that, and it's amazing that they actually completed it and did a good job of it. I haven't read the book, but from what I've heard and knowing the album, it's got to be pretty amazing.
Yeah, and I'm a sucker for concept albums. I love those ideas that fall throughout the entire album or the entire series of albums, if you ever get one of those. I'm just a sucker for that stuff. And with Clockwork Angels, reading the book, which I actually have, it brought the series kind of, or the whole album a little bit more up for me, because I could listen to each individual song and know what was going on with it. Kevin J. Anderson actually refers to the story as follows. In a young man's quest to follow his dreams, he is caught between the grandiose forces of order and chaos. He travels across a lavish and colorful world of steampunk and alchemy, with lost cities, pirates, anarchists, exotic carnivals, and a rigid watchmaker who imposes precision on every aspect of daily life. His quote there kind of sums up the entire story. And when you listen to the album, if you even don't know about the book and you listen to this, you can hear all those elements in his description of the story.
I mean, it's definitely not something you're going to hear the first time. I definitely think it's one where you grab the book and you sit down and listen to it. It's not I'm passingly listening to the album. If you really want to get the concept, like any concept album, you have to sit and pay attention to what's going on, have the book with the lyrics in front of you, and really be able to grab it. And you do get it I've done that with this album, and I do get some of the story. Obviously, I'm missing a lot of the points that are in the book. You can't really piece all these things together completely just by the album. But I imagine with the book, you would be able to see it. And you do see a concept throughout it. Without having read the book, you do see the concept throughout it. But it's not fleshed out the way I imagine it is in the book.
Yeah, it's not nearly as fleshed out. And every single time that I listen to the album, now that I've read the book, I still recall all the scenes from the book that correlate with the song lyrics every single time I listen to it. And that happens with me on other concept albums, with Dream Theater, Scenes from a Memory, Part 2, or Metropolis, Scenes from a Memory, Part 2, that Alice Cooper, Welcome to My Nightmare, and stuff like that. I still correlate every time I listen to those songs. I still correlate the story to it, and it brings a whole new facet to the music that you never really understood beforehand.
Yeah, it's kind of almost like a soundtrack to the book. Would you describe it in that way?
Yes, or the book is the soundtrack to the album.
When you watch a movie that has when I watch Dazed and Confused, I hear those songs are so definable with that film, they stand out. When you watch Guardians of the Galaxy, those scenes stand out with that music. So when you hear those songs, it instantly makes you recall those scenes in the film. Would you say it's a similar experience like that when you hear those songs that instantly, as you said, recall the scenes from the book?
Oh, for sure. And I really wish, when we went, when you watch the tour from the Clockwork Angels tour on DVD, I really wish they would have done. They do a lot of video stuff. I really wish they would have done more stuff in keeping with the story of the book. And I'd like to see somebody out there, a fan or something like that, to actually make a fan movie based on the entire album.
Yeah, if we can get a Music from the Elder, video, somebody wanted to make that as a short film, we can obviously do to have a Clockwork Angels film.
Yeah, so I mean, it's wholly underrated as an album because Rush is kind of old now and nobody really wants to get into them. But I really feel that Clockwork Angels is the best album that they've had since 1975. And if you're going to get the album, I would surely invest in checking out the book by Kevin J. Anderson called Clockwork Angels. It's not too hard to remember. There's only one title between the two of them. It's a nice steampunk book, and those two together, I think you're going to have a good experience listening to them. Any final thoughts on Clockwork Angels, the book, or the album?
Well, I can only judge the book on its cover, which is, it's okay. I'm sure that what's inside's a little better, as you've stated. But for the album itself, it really is a great album. You can't, just because an artist or a band has gotten older, you can't underwrite them. I mean, Neil Diamond has put out some great works recently. Johnny Cash put out some of the best material in his career near the end of his life. Just because a band or an artist is aged, you can't underscore the fact that they're still great. Rush are legends. They deserve to be legends. They're amazing, and this album's amazing. I agree.
So I'm going to just end this by imploring you to go check out, even if you don't read the book, go check out the album Clockwork Angels by Rush.
It's the final countdown.
Alrighty, welcome to the final countdown. We're going to end the show here with our top 5 Weird Al parodies. Now, these are songs that were originally done by another artist, and Weird Al redid. They're not songs that are style parodies. Don't get the mistake there, because those are actually Weird Al originals, just done in the style of another band. So we're going to start here with top 5 parodies. I'm going to go. Do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I think it's great that we're doing this. I mean, Weird Al has shown how huge he is as an artist. He just had his first number one album. He was Billboard #1. There's once again another thing online to try and get him forum online and try and get him to do the Super Bowl halftime show. He's just an icon. He's been around for 30 plus years, and he's going to stick around until he's done, I think. And so let's get it started.
All right. So number 5, I'm going to start off with the theme from Rocky 8. This is on one of his earlier albums. It's actually the earliest song I have on my list. It's actually a parody of The Eye of the Tiger by Survivor, a Rocky 3 song. And it actually kind of was weird that it foretold the restaurant kind of in Rocky Balboa. But I really like the song, the Rye or the Kaiser. What's your number 5?
My number 5 is going to be my oldest one on my list, probably as well, is going to be the song that he became most known for. He even has on his Twitter, so the Eat It Guy, because he did Eat It. And it was huge, a parody of Michael Jackson's Beat It. And the video, for me, it was a huge part of the MTV generation, getting it going with the guys fighting with the rubber chicken and the forks and stuff. It had some classic moments in it. He's known for his videos, and that was one of the best ones. So that's my number 5.
All right, my number 4 is going to be Taco Grande, which is actually a parody of Rico Suave. The song is just freaking hilarious. And living here in New Mexico, it even kind of hits home a little bit more. Well-written, well-constructed song. I think it was... I still get a laugh every time I hear it. What's your number 4?
My number 4 is actually going to be a parody of Trash Day. I actually don't know the song it's a parody of. It's off of Poodle Hat, which came out in, I believe, 2001. I can't believe it. I see, like, I don't really know a lot of the songs. I don't listen to a lot of pop music, so I don't know sometimes what these songs are that are covered. I'm sure we're gonna make sure I research and have that answer for you before the end of this countdown and find out what song that's a parody of. But that's my number 4.
Alrighty. My number 3 is gonna be White and Nerdy. This is my theme song here. I don't know the original one for that one either.
It's Riding Dirty by Chamillionaire.
Riding Dirty. That's on the Luigi Death Stare video that I like so much. Is actually White and Nerdy, my theme song. The lyrics just kind of speak to me as I go. You can't. I mean, you got a shirt. This is White and Nerdy. I wish I would have one that said White and Nerdy. But that's my song. Your number 3?
Before I give my number 3, the answer to that question is "It's Getting Hot Here" by Nelly. And that would be the answer to what Trash Day is a parody of. My number 3 is Jerry Springer, which is a parody of One Week by Bare Naked Ladies. I think this song is one of the most laugh out loud funny songs that Weird Al has done, not just of his parodies, but of all of his songs. I think it's hilarious. I think it really summed up what Jerry Springer was about and how ridiculous the show was. And I think it's aged well. I mean, the song One Week is a good song. It's fun, and it was a perfect ripe for parody. My
number 2 is going to be the song that I have the most nostalgia for. The first one I fell in love with from Weird Al would be Amish Paradise, a parody of Gangster's Paradise by Coolio. The Coolio version really sucks, but this was the first song I loved, and the video is still memorable. I remember singing this song word for word. I know this is the one song from Weird Al I know every single word over, from beginning to end, the choruses and everything. What's your number 2?
Oh, what song was that a parody of, did you say? Did I miss that?
Paradise.
Gangster's Paradise. I apologize. I missed that. My number 2 you've already mentioned is White and Nerdy. I think you summed it up pretty well. There's not much more I can say about how awesome that song is. It describes a lot of my personality. I mean, the battle between the only question that was hard was whether I like Kirk or Picard. It really stands out in my mind is and Earl Grey, he's talking about Earl Grey. Yeah, that song's great. That's my number 2.
I have honestly played Minesweeper for days, to be honest, totally honest with you. So my number 1 is going to be Trapped in the Drive-Thru. which is, I believe, Trapped in the Closet. It's a parody of Trapped in the Closet. It's just an epic masterpiece. And if you ever get the chance, hop onto YouTube. It's not the official video, but there's a little cartoon video somebody constructed for the song, and it's priceless. I can't really argue with the epic masterpiece that is Trapped in the Drive-Thru. What's your number one Weird Al parody?
My number one Weird Al parody, I have to mention something. I wanted this song played at my wedding, and unfortunately I didn't get to have it. But it was Confessions Part 3, which is a parody of, I believe, Confessions Part 2 by Usher. And the lyrics are just sum up the kind of person I want to be in my relationships, the kind of person I want to, the kind of man I am. That song really sums it up, I think.
Alrighty, so there's our top 5 Weird Al parodies. Thanks for joining us for our 3rd episode of Schreck Talk. Join us next week where we go into out of the movies and TV shows, and we actually go and discuss a band, Pink Floyd. We're also going to list our top 5 favorite Olympians, and I'm going to write a letter to my African pen pal, Ndugu. See you next week.
Go away or I shall taunt you a second time.